just like you go to any major university, especially in America, the leader in world education, you'll find that in the university, so many subject matters are being taught. Our spiritual master was once giving a talk at a very famous educational institution in America. And he opened his lecture with a question. He said, in this great university of the United States of America, is there any department that tells you what happens after death? It was okay before.
I put it back as it is.
And there was completely pin drop silence. So we are studying so many different types of courses. But unfortunately, in the education that we are cultivating, there is a spiritual vacuum. So here Krishna says, this is the king of education. Now someone may want to know why. Unless we know what our constitutional position is, what is our relationship with the Lord, all other aspects of knowledge will remain incomplete. Our spiritual master used to explain 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 100 more zeros equals to 0. But if you add the figure 1, then the zeros become meaningful. Similarly, unless God is the focal point, our efforts will be futile. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna educates us to understand who are we, what is our constitutional position. The second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita in detail discusses that there is a soul in the body, and the nature of the soul is it doesn't take birth, it doesn't die. And the Vedic scriptures also give us information regarding the measurement of the soul. They explain what is the measurement of the soul? 1 10,000 or the tip of your hair. As long as there's soul in the body, there is consciousness. What is the difference between a living being and a dead person? The dead person's body is also still there. We cry, we say it's gone. Why? Because there's something in the body that is not there. That is the soul. And because as long as the soul is there, there is consciousness. So the beginning of spiritual education is to understand, just like the body is covered by clothes, the soul is covered by a body. And the type of body that one can obtain is going to vary. You can take your birth in lower species of life, human species of life, etc. And that's going to be determined by our actions. So Bhagavad Gita explains the eternal nature of the soul. It says that for the soul, there is no birth, no death, not having once lived, that he ever ceased to be. Just like when you want to learn to read and write any language, the first thing you learn is the alphabet, ABCD. So the ABCD of spiritual knowledge is to understand who we are. Now, Krishna further tells us in the 3rd and the 5th chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, called Karma Yoga, and Karma Yoga, action and Krishna consciousness, with what mentality we should act. Sometimes people think, if I take to the message of the Bhagavad Gita, if I take interest in spirituality, then I will lose all interest in my business, job, profession, career prospects, etc. No. Krishna doesn't preach inaction. Krishna is advising action, but action for the pleasure of the Lord. The Bhagavad Gita gives a nice example. Gives the example of a lotus leaf that is in water. Most of you come from India, so you have experience that the lotus leaf remains in water but doesn't touch the water. In some parts of the world like Russia, they don't see lotus leaves, so they can't relate to this example. There's a lotus leaf that grows in water but it's not touched. But those of you who have seen lotus leaves grow in water know that it's in water but doesn't touch the water. So Krishna gives this example in the Bhagavad Gita to explain that we should act, but act for the pleasure of the Lord. In the Bhagavatam, there's an example given. It says that that very activity which is the cause of bondage becomes the cause of liberation when it is used in the service of the Lord. Just like milk causes a bad stomach. It's universal knowledge. But the same milk, when it is consumed in a form of yogurt, it cures a bad stomach. So we have to perform actions. It's not that if you become a devotee, you become inactive. Today, the Krishna conscious movement is virtually in every corner of the globe. And in every corner of the globe there are thousands and thousands of devotees. And most of these are people who live at home, do jobs, businesses, education, etc. So the point is, one should learn to act for the pleasure of the Lord, just like when Krishna was instructing Arjuna, he said, with the mind and intelligence dedicated to me, do your duty as a Kshatriya. So that should be our mentality. We may have different abilities, different skills, we may be pursuing different careers, but ultimately our goal should be to please the Supreme Lord. Just like when you pour water to the root of the tree, you automatically nourish all the branches, isn't it? A tree has so many leaves, so many branches. You just pour water on the root of the tree and they all get nourished. Or when you're hungry, you put food in the stomach and the entire body gets nourished. Similarly, it is explained by performing bhakti yoga, service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One discharges all one's obligations towards demigod, society, etc. And the conclusion of all the Vedic texts is that devotional service is a means through which we can attract the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Patra puspam phalam toyam yome bhaktya prayosam. Offer me with love and devotion, even a leaf and a flower, and I will accept it. So Krishna is explaining that this knowledge is the king of education. He's explaining that this knowledge actually is the perfection of knowledge. We don't say, don't cultivate mature knowledge. We don't say, don't go to schools. We have members who go to the best schools, have broken educational records. But along with that, one should also cultivate mature education, spiritual knowledge. And when you cultivate spiritual knowledge along with mature knowledge, then you know how to use mature knowledge. Otherwise, mature knowledge tends to be misused. Now in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is also teaching that this betrothal